It's Game Boy Works, and this is a fittingly unexciting 30th anniversary episode. The Game Boy Works project is temporarily taking a pause while I blaze through its unloved cousin Virtual Boy, but I couldn't let the occasion of the system's 30th anniversary pass without commentary. The entire Video Works venture kicked off on Game Boy's 25th anniversary as Game Boy World, which means I've been doing this project on a pretty much weekly basis for 5 years. To mark this milestone of a squandered existence, I'm taking one quick detour back to the platform that started it all. Let's look at the first two titles for the far future publication that will be Game Boy Works Volume 3, Square Deal and Parasol Henbee. Neither Square Deal nor Parasol Henbee is particularly inspiring or worth hunting down in the year 2019, but in a way that makes them somewhat ideal representatives for the system's birthday. The masterpieces like Zelda and Final Fantasy Legend II were few and far between on Game Boy. Most of the handheld's library fell into the pleasant time killer category, and that's more or less what these are. Square Deal didn't begin life on Game Boy, but it seems like it was tailor-made for the system. It combines two of the platform's go-to genres, falling block puzzlers and casino games, into an odd but effective mashup. Square Deal is quite simply poker meets Puyo Puyo. Players are given a standard deck of 52 cards, and then tasked to clear the deck with a combination of poker and match 3 rules. You begin the game with 1,000 points, spend 500 to ante-in, and are required to earn a set score in order to complete a round and move along to the next. Initially, you only need to earn 1,000 points in a round, but eventually you need to earn 2,000, then 3,000, and then, well, I can't really say because the 3,000 tier is hard and I never got any further. The way it works is this. Cards fall into the active well area one by one, and you need to keep the well clear by matching different cards as they land. If the well overflows and a card lands above the kill line at the top, you instantly lose the round. However, you'll also lose if you manage to work through the entire deck without reaching the target score. You're awarded different point quantities based on the complexity of the matches you make, and you're penalized 100 points for each card you leave behind in the well. But even if you clear all 52 cards, you can still lose if your point total doesn't add up to the target sum. It's a demanding game. As I said, Square Deal operates with match 3 rules, which are modified to account for the face value and suites of the deck. Both the suites and values of cards can be matched to clear away a trio of cards, but you can't win a hand if you simply stick to removing 3 like values or suites at a time. A basic match like that only nets you 10 points, meaning the best score you can hope to earn that way in a round is 170, well short of the first tier's 1,000 point requirement. Instead, you need to make more complex matches by bumping up against poker rules. That is to say, you need to make the same kind of matches you'd want to earn in a real hand of poker. At the most basic level, you can go for a straight and place 3 cards with consecutive face values next to one another. If you're brave enough, you can try an advanced tactic like shooting for a flush, or a straight flush if you're both good and lucky. You'll earn even more points by lining up a combination of 5 cards at once by placing 4 cards, 2 each on opposite sides, and dropping the 5th card into the center space. It's even possible to pull off Puyo Puyo style chain combos by setting up a disconnected match that ends up being completed by clearing the cards that separate them. This is extraordinarily difficult and requires a level of skill and vision I lack, but at least the game shows off this capability in the Attract Mode demo. Unlike in Tetris, you're not forced to use the one piece, or card, that happens to be falling at the time. Instead, you have a hand of several cards and can use the B button to cycle through them. You can even tap A to freeze the action and make a selection, which is a nice touch, although you have only a limited number of seconds available per round. All in all, this is a pretty clever combo of 2 disparate genres, and it works pretty well. I wish the requirements didn't ramp up quite so quickly in Square Deal, because it becomes way too demanding, way too fast. The 3,000 point level would be daunting enough on its own, but add to that the fact that it also introduces handicaps to the mix and reduces the number of active cards from 4 to 3. It's a vicious jump in difficulty. Square Deal is actually the sequel to a Famicom game called CADILLAC, which comes to us courtesy of developer Hecht. Also known as Hector, Hecht made its name in the mid-80s with a minor arcade hit, City Connection, and never turned out another game that managed to muster up the same degree of success. But if Square Deal is anything to go by, their lack of success wasn't for lack of effort. This is a pretty interesting, if extremely tough, portable puzzler. Somewhat less interesting than Square Deal is the Game Boy's next release, a Japan-only licensed platformer from SAS Sakata and Epic. Remember them? They gave us Cyraid, a weirdo puzzle action game whose Japanese packaging did that Clash at Demon Head thing where it presented itself with the confidence and style of an existing media property, even though it was actually an original production. Well, Parasol Henbee actually was licensed from an existing media property. In this case, the franchise in question was an anime series by the same title, dreamed up by Doraemon co-creator Fujiko A. Fujio. In other words, it kind of falls into the same bucket as Chubby CHERUB on NES, in that it has Doraemon-esque designs. And the game itself is also cut from the same cloth. That is to say, it's a middling platformer with awkward flight mechanics, set in a combination of city streets and woodsy environments. With a little tweaking, this could practically be Chubby CHERUB 2, despite coming from a different developer and publisher altogether. In the anime, Henbei is an almost tapir-like character with connections to dreams, and he carries around the parasol that lends the series its name. The parasol in the cartoon lets Henbei fly around at will, though that of course has to be somewhat limited here in order to make for a balanced game. I can't honestly say that SAS Sakata entirely figured it out. Parasol Henbei for Game Boy tries to do a lot of things, and it has a habit of tripping over itself in the process. For one thing, Henbei makes use of an adventure island-like stamina meter. This doesn't tick down constantly like Master Higgins' meter, but it is refilled by consuming food found around each stage. The meter determines what Henbei can do. By tapping B, you can expend a couple of stamina points that cause him to spin into a whirlwind and knock out the various monsters that appear around the stage. Being hit by a foe isn't instantly fatal here as it would be in some licensed game, which is a huge point in Henbei's favor. Collisions do sap Henbei's stamina, but you can take a few hits, and food recharge items are pretty generous. Still, it's not ideal to go spamming attacks willy-nilly or squeaking by with Henbei's stamina near empty, because the level of his energy meter has an impact on gameplay. When Henbei's stamina is critical, the game becomes almost impossible. He moves sluggishly, can't jump well, and can't deploy his parasol. In effect, you might as well just give up. With his stamina at optimal levels, though, Henbei is a pretty versatile little guy. Besides running and jumping and spin attacking, he can perform a few other notable feats. For starters, he can climb poles. The stages here tend to have multiple tiers, and some upper tiers, especially in town levels, can only be reached by scurrying up electrical poles. Additionally, every stage has a sort of forced semi-3D perspective, similar to Double Dragon, which allows Henbei to move into and out of the screen. This is more limited than in something like Double Dragon or Final Fight. It's really more like there's a near and a far position. But this does create lanes of action to navigate. And finally, Henbei can use his parasol when he jumps to float gently to the ground. By pressing up while in midair, you'll pop out an umbrella that causes Henbei to float somewhat erratically in the direction you're pressing. You can cancel your drift and drop at any moment by pressing down, although there's a bit of a delay in this that makes it hard to be precise, which is a real hassle when you're dealing with moving platforms. The biggest problem with the parasol mechanic, though, is that it doesn't play well with the near-far positioning system. You move Henbei into and out of the screen while walking along the ground by pressing up and down as well. Normally, you'd think a character with this ability, and these somewhat fluid jump control physics, would also be able to shift vertical planes in midair by tapping up or down, but no, that activates the parasol, and I constantly found myself fumbling with the parasol when I wanted to move into the back action lane while in midair. It's a minor nuisance, I guess, but it bears mentioning. More annoying is the fact that the platform edge detection in this game is awful. Parasol Henbei isn't a tough game, and it dispenses extra lives like candy, but you'll quickly find yourself hitting a wall anytime one of the auto-scrolling sky stages shows up. These levels are all about platforming, and they tend to be needlessly taxing due to Henbei's clunky controls, floaty physics, and tendency to slip through platform edges. It doesn't help that this is a game without checkpoints, and the stages grow considerably in length as you advance. One slip up and you're back to the start of a level with a meager amount of stamina. It's a pretty lengthy game, too, considering. There are about 15 stages all told, although only 10 appear initially on the world map. The other 5 are revealed once you complete the 10th stage. By the time you finish the 10th stage, though, that's less of a, oh neat, more game moment than an, oh god, more game kind of thing. This is one of those games that almost manages to be fun, but it's all just a little too underbaked to work out, and it just goes on and on. One thing it does have working in its favor, though, is that once you manage to get Henbei's stamina more or less maxed out, you gain a new ability. Rather than deploying your parasol to drift downward, you can use it to fly for a few seconds. This makes the more difficult platforming sections much more palatable. And it's a testament to the designers here that the toughest jumping sequences in every level appear toward the end, If you manage to play smartly, collect all the food, and avoid using up your stamina by carelessly launching attacks or taking damage, Henbee will invariably have enough energy to sail past some of the more unfair action sequences. Still, it would be better if the game had better controls and less flaky platform detection. I'm also not a fan of the decision to throw inexplicable boss battles into the final few stages. In fact, I can't actually finish the next to last stage here because the action comes to a halt while you face off against a giant monkey that causes rocks and stalactites to fall. Unfortunately, none of Henbee's abilities seem to do any direct damage, nor can you really cause any indirect damage by diverting projectiles or whatever. And that's on top of the weird encounter with wild boars in the previous stage. These rush back and forth at you until you manage to stun one and hop on its back to ride to the exit. Nothing like these encounters appears anywhere else in the game, which makes them very obtuse. And if you fail, you have to play the whole grueling level all over again. In a word, the endgame kinda sucks. I don't know though, I've played much worse licensed games. Like Cyraid, this is a bit of a mess, but it's a well-meaning mess that does more legwork than most licensed games of the era bothered with. Heck, there's even a Cyraid nod. Every few stages, you encounter a bonus screen where you earn stamina and bonus lives by overturning hats, kind of like the jar rooms in ICARUS. Unlike in ICARUS though, you don't lose everything you found if you uncover something bad. And the something bad here isn't the Grim Reaper, it's the weird moon robot from Cyraid. Now that's a deep cut. Later this year, when Game Boy Works returns in earnest, you'll find out what RESPECT means to me.